chicken Wolverine!
AppStateCentral.com weekly podcast.
All right, and good evening, and welcome to the 12th installment of the AppStateCentral.com weekly podcast. As always, a big thank you to the Marching Mountaineers and the Appalachian Sports Network for providing those clips you just heard in the intro. My name is Bryden, and along with me is my co-host, Mike. Mike, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing great, man. Doing great.
Good to hear. Yeah, me too. I'm super excited to head up to the Rock this Saturday and watch our Mountaineers hopefully advance in the playoffs. And we'll talk about that a little bit here tonight during the show. And we're also going to talk about our basketball teams, men's and women's, and how they're starting the season off, and just a little bit more about App Sports. But before we can get into that, Mike, how about you tell our listeners how to interact with us via the social media?
Yep, as always, if you want to interact with us during the show or anytime throughout the week, you can send us a tweet. We are at App State Central. You can post on the Facebook wall, which is at facebook.com/AppStateCentral. We always welcome feedback from any listeners or anyone who visits the site. So if you have suggestions or comments, questions, feel free to stop in anytime.
Yeah, definitely. And like Mike said, social media, you can also hit us up on our website, appstatecentral.com. We've got a message board there. We've got a platform where you can post your own blogs. We are open to expanding all of the communication fronts to app fans. So hit us up and let us know how we could do that. So as I mentioned, we're going to begin tonight's episode with talking about the men's and women's basketball teams and what kind of a start they've gotten off to so far. So Mike, how about let's start with the women, since they seem to be having a more successful start so far.
Yeah, there they are. Coach Vincent looks like she's got he got another strong team this year. The women are off to a 4-1 start. The only loss was against an ACC opponent. It was on the road at Virginia Tech. They ended up falling by a 71-68 final. Have won their other 4 contests, and as was the case last year, we're led by the Freemans. Anna and Courtney are both having great starts for the first 5 games of the year. Anna's averaging 21 points, 8.2 boards, 4 assists per game, shooting very well from the field, 47% field goal, 96% from the free throw line. And then Courtney Freeman as well, averaging 16.4 points, 5.8 rebounds, 3 assists per game, and also very efficient, 54% field goal, 77% free throws. So we've got 2 star players on that team that are probably going to be kind of carrying most of the scoring load throughout the year. But that's nothing new for this team, and just like the last couple of seasons, I expect the Lady Mountaineers to be a factor in the Southern Conference, and winning or contending for the regular season championship. And I think that really the question for this year is going to be if they're able to kind of get over that hump in the SoCon tournament after losing to Sanford the last couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. They look like they're right on the right track again, and hopefully they can continue the road and win that Southern Conference tournament and go to the NCAA tournament. And about that loss at Virginia Tech, we lost by 3, and we actually had basically a wide open layup that would have tied the game with a few seconds left that we missed, unfortunately. So it was close all the way through. Anna Freeman, I believe, had 36 points and was something ridiculous, like 6 of 8 on the threes. So we've got a very, very solid team, and Coach Vincent has this team. They are in the right direction. We've got a lot of really good players out there, and she's really changed the dynamic of the entire women's basketball program so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was actually going to mention that about the Virginia Tech game as well, that, Courtney Freeman had a bit of an off game. She only had 11 points that night, but Anna Freeman was just on fire, scored 36 points, hit 6 3-pointers, added on, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, couple of steals, couple of blocks. So she really had a great game. She played her heart out. We came up a little bit short, but as you mentioned, really the culture of that program and the expectations of Appalachia's women basketball really has changed a lot under Coach Vincent, and they look like they're on the right track again.
They definitely are, and unfortunately, I want to try to keep this a little short just because it is early in the season. We really still don't know a whole lot about either team. and also I want to get into the playoffs. But unfortunately, our men's team, they're not doing as hot as our women's. They've actually got a completely opposite record. They're 1-4 so far with no Division One wins, and their only victory so far has been over NAIA Montreat. But we are starting to look like a team, starting to look better with our last two games versus ECU and Virginia Tech. And we are, I think, headed in the right path. I'm hoping that Coach Capel has them starting to buy into his system and playing as a team again. So what have you seen so far?
Well, I've honestly, the only game I've not been able to watch was the victory over Montreat. I've watched all four of the Division One games, and honestly, the first two were just, they were hard to stomach. I mean, those are games that obviously you're not going to win every game, but for our program, we should not be getting blown out, lopsided losses to Big South teams, and particularly at home. The High Point game was one of the ugliest Appalachian games I can remember watching. We lost 86-64, and to be quite honest, we were lucky to lose by 22. They had stretched lead out to 30 on more than one occasion, and we just looked out of sorts. There was possessions where we had guys that seemed like half the team was playing zone, the other half was playing man. We came out of a timeout and went down to play defense when it was our ball. We were just very, very disorganized, very out of it. And same thing for the first half against Campbell. Now, one thing though that I will say is that even though we are on a losing streak, we have looked much better the last two games and probably maybe the last 10 minutes or so of that Campbell game. We lost that game by 19 points. That was one where we actually trimmed the lead down to 10 or 12, and it stretched out a little bit when we had to start taking early threes. But in our two games against East Carolina and Virginia Tech, both those teams are 5-0 right now. So those are a couple of pretty quality basketball teams. We lost by 10 at East Carolina, lost by 11 at Virginia Tech. Both were true road games against good teams, and even though we ended up falling a little short in the end, we competed for 40 minutes in both of those games, and really were never out of either one of them. They were both very close from beginning to end. And we will get into the football, but just a couple things. Obviously, it's been a lot of negatives around the men's basketball program, and Coach Capel's seat is starting to heat up a little bit. But I do see some positives for this team. One, Jay Canty is as good as advertised. The Xavier transfer in his first year. He's been great through the first 5 games, averaging 16.6 points, 6.8 rebounds, 2.2 assists. He's doing a little bit of everything, and everybody we've played, including ACC, when we went and played Virginia Tech, they've really not had anybody that could stop him offensively, and he's been a great player. Nate Healy is having an excellent senior season, 13 points, 6 boards a game, and we're very balanced offensively with Canty, Healy, Hamilton, and Trice all averaging in double digits. Tevin Baskin is a true freshman, contributing close to 10 points and 6 boards a game. And one thing that's really missing from this team is Mike Neal, our point guard. He's missing the first 9 games because of academic ineligibility. He'll be back for the game against South Carolina. And I don't necessarily think that he is such a great individual player that he himself is just going to elevate this team, but it really will change the whole dynamic having a true point guard in there. Chris Burgess is played fairly well, but he's a true freshman. He's only 5'8". He's undersized. He's still adjusting to the college game. And the other option, who we've actually been starting, is Jamal Trice, playing out of position. So not only will Mike Neal provide someone who, even though he's only a sophomore, he played a lot last year, had a strong finish to his freshman year. And, he'll provide hopefully a little bit of leadership, kind of a steady hand leading the offense, and almost as importantly, he'll allow Jamal Trice to go back to his natural position and play off the ball, and hopefully be able to get set up for some more open jump shots when he's not having to worry about trying to run the offense. So it's been a tough start. It looks like it might be a tough season, but I do see some improvements among those individual players, and as a team, we've looked better. We did compete, I thought, very well against East Carolina and Virginia Tech, and if we're able to sort of carry that momentum into the conference season, outside of Davidson and Charleston, there's really not a there's really no teams in the Southern Conference that I think are all that dangerous outside of possibly Chattanooga. And I think if we're able to carry that play over, we're going to be competitive in conference, which is really what we should be focused on. And even though Mike Neal's missing 9 games, he's only going to miss 1 conference game. Unfortunately, it's against Western, but he's only going to miss 1 conference game. So we'll have our full complement of players for nearly the entire Southern Conference slate, and we can just kind of hope that behind Canty and Healy and getting Mike Neal back, we'll be able to get things turned around.
Yeah, definitely, and I think getting Mike Neal back is going to be a key to that. When he took over last year as a starting point guard, about midway, closer to the end of the season, that's when we really started picking up our stride and almost made a run in the tournament. In the SoCon tournament. So I definitely think he's going to hopefully bring that back. And like you said, it's going to make Jamal Trice be able to go to his natural position as a 2 or 3 guy, as opposed to running the point and getting the assists. He'd much rather shoot the ball, which in our system is not necessarily the best for the point guard to do. So I also think bringing in Mike Neal will help with maturing Baskin a little bit, or not Baskin, Burgess, sorry. It'll help him mature and see how Mike Neal runs the offense. So I think that it's going to be a twofold. It's going to be twofold in bringing Mike Neal back from the academic and eligibility. So obviously it's very early in both seasons, only 5 games under both belts here. And the women's team is looking very promising, and as of now, from what I've seen, should be the favorites in the SoCon. Hopefully, they can get past Sanford in the tournament, SoCon tournament. And the men's team they look to be on the right track. They're getting there. And the other thing is, I mean, we lost by 10 to ECU and 11 to Virginia Tech, and both of those teams are 5-0. So those are both solid teams. Seem to be solid teams. Again, early in the season, it's hard to say as of now, but seem to be very solid teams that we're getting better, and we seem to be getting better because, or as soon as Jamal Trice started starting at point guard. So getting Mike Neal back, again, I hate to harp on that, but getting Mike Neal back on that, it should help just going forward. It obviously can't hurt. So hopefully we get on the right track there, and our basketball team our men's team at least, is respectable again.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's we've got a lot of new guys. I believe we have 8 players on the roster that were not here last year, or in the case of Jay Canty, were not eligible for game action last year. But we've got a lot of new faces in there. It's one of those things where you sort of have to kind of play through the pain a little bit and have those growing pains. But it looks like even though it's discouraging to watch your team lose, there is the product on the court looks like there is progress. So. We just kind of have to, support them and hope that as the season goes on, they continue to improve, and that translates to some wins, especially in conference play.
Exactly. That's the least we can do at this point, is continue supporting them. So get out there to the home center and see any game you can, especially students that is free. Go out there, bear the cold weather. It's not too cold up there yet, so get up there and support the team. Especially, I believe they play tomorrow. They play Duquesne tomorrow, so get out there at 7 and support that team there.
They do. They play Duquesne tomorrow at 7:00 at the home center. Duquesne is, I believe, they're 2-4, I believe, or maybe 2-3. They're an Atlantic 10 team. They're not particularly strong this year. There should be a winnable game for us. I do honestly think if we play against them the same way we played against East Carolina, Virginia Tech, we will get that win. We'll get that first Division I win. Hopefully, get that taken care of at home. And I really think that. But the stretch we have coming up, we've got Missouri and South Carolina coming up. Those are obviously both, major conference teams. They're going to be tough. 2-4 as opposed to 1-5 at this point in the year really is a big difference. And this is, it's as close to a must-win as you can have 5 games into the season. So if anyone's up there in the area and, you're discouraged about the start, please go out there and support them if you can, because I from what I've seen, they are getting better, and, they need all the support from us they can get.
Definitely. And as we promised, we're going to get to the football stuff a little bit. We're not getting to playoffs just yet, But Mike, today we heard news that both Tulane and ECU are headed to the Big East. Tulane for all sports and ECU for football only. And this opens a few spots in the Conference USA and will likely have a trickle down effect through more conference realignment that seems to be going on for 2 or 3 years now and hasn't stopped yet. So how do you think this plays out in terms of App getting an FBS conference invite, whether it's Conference USA, Sun Belt, MAC, any one that's a cause of that trickle down effect?
Well, I think that I think that this does benefit us. I don't know that it's going to be directly in Conference USA just because, the main proponent for inviting us to the conference just left. East Carolina was kind of the biggest voice at the table that was kind of in our corner and would have liked to have us as a conference partner. So, them leaving, I don't think helps our chance of getting into Conference USA because, to be quite honest, I don't think UNC Charlotte or Marshall has any desire to be back in a conference with us. So I don't know that it'll get us into Conference USA, but that does leave spots in Conference USA to fill, and I do believe that they'll probably go to the Sun Belt to fill those spots because regardless of what the product on the field might be, and I'm of the opinion that the Sun Belt, especially minus the East Carolina, minus Central Florida, all the teams that are leaving, minus Houston, all those teams that are leaving, I think the product on the field is probably just as good in the Sun Belt. But as long as Conference USA has a more lucrative TV deal, they've got at this point still a little bit better name recognition than the Sun Belt, they will probably be able to get their pick of Sun Belt schools to come join them, based on the kind of the how they've been doing realignment in Conference USA. In spite of their horrible performance on the field, it wouldn't be completely shocking to see them invite Georgia State just to get a hold of the Atlanta market. I think the most likely scenario is that they take Middle Tennessee State and Western Kentucky from the Sun Belt and bring them into Conference USA, which would then open up at least two spots in the Sun Belt. I think it's all kind of both conferences are kind of jockeying for position at this point. I think the Sun Belt, seeing what's happening in the Conference USA and seeing them as possibly being a little bit weaker, they might want to try their hand and seeing if they can maybe pry a Southern Miss or UAB out of Conference USA to come play in the Sun Belt and parlay that into getting a better TV deal for themselves. I really don't think that could happen. And, the Big East, I don't think they're done yet either. It's entirely possible that they take even more Conference USA teams. So whether it's in Conference USA or the Sun Belt, I think it will open up a spot for us. As it stands right now, if I had to guess, I think that what might end up happening is Middle Tennessee State and Western Kentucky go from the Sun Belt to Conference USA, and Appalachian and Georgia Southern go to the Sun Belt.
Yeah, I think that's right on par. That's exactly my thinking as well. And then, from my understanding, we essentially had an invite already from Sun Belt earlier in the year. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mike. This is just kind of hearsay, what I've read on forums and newspaper articles and all that kind of stuff. We essentially had an invite from Sun Belt already, but it was a tandem invite. It was one that if we were to go, then Georgia Southern had to go. But at that time, Georgia Southern had not approved the move to FBS, so they were not able to go. The board had not approved it yet, and they have now. So now I think if we get that invitation, where I think we take it, and I'm like you, I think the Sun Belt at this point is just as competitive as Conference USA. Since everyone's leaving, essentially. Honestly, I would give an argument that Sun Belt's probably more competitive than Conference USA at this point. The other conference to look at is actually the MAC with James Madison. It's not any kind of surprise that James Madison wants to move up as well, and the MAC is probably at least this year the strongest of the conferences that we could move up to. They have currently 2 teams in the top 25 with Kent State and Northern Illinois. Obviously, that will vary year to year, but MAC is also, it'll likely be more travel, but from an academic standpoint, the MAC fits our build more than the other conferences. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out. It's obviously Mike and I do not know one bit how it's going to happen. This is all hearsay and what we think is going to happen. So it's going to be very interesting to see. And we've got a few questions actually from the chat here on the podcast forum from Ryan Norris. And the first question is, and I'll let you answer this, Mike. First question is, does App deserve to be in the Conference USA?
Well, I think that we do. I honestly, I don't think that we are necessarily what they're looking for. I think they want a bigger market, but I think that and I think that we bring a lot to that conference, especially now that East Carolina has departed. We bring a lot in terms of attendance for our football program. It's a very well supported football program. I think our on-field product would be competitive, if not immediately, very shortly once we got into Conference USA. One thing, just in looking at it objectively and kind of taking off the black and gold glasses, I mean, one thing that you can say, I think from a football standpoint, we absolutely deserve to be in there. But from an overall athletic standpoint, I think the one thing that is kind of going to be, that red mark next to our name is, how our men's basketball program is done. We just really have not been able to put a consistently good product on the court, on the men's side, really on a consistent basis, for, it's close to 10 years. We've had some good teams, but, we really have not been consistent in that regard. And that's something where, football obviously drives the bus. Our attendance, our results on the field are all very heavily in our favor. But basketball is the number 2 sport. And, looking at any conference, Conference USA is, historically a conference that'll get, multiple teams into the NCAA tournament. That might change a little bit now that Memphis is left, but that's the one thing that's holding us back. I do think that we deserve to be in Conference USA, but unfortunately, the way that the conference realignment is working nowadays, they are going for the bigger TV markets. They want to use that to get better television deals, and it unfortunately for us really looks like that. On-field results kind of take a back seat to what kind of TV market you provide, and what kind of dollars you can bring to the conference that aren't related at all to what kind of teams you're putting out there.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%, especially about the men's basketball and just athletics as a whole. That's what a lot of people don't realize when we're talking about moving up is, ECU is moving to the Big East for football only, but as of this point, they don't have a home for any other of their sports. And the Southern Conference, likely, the history has shown that they won't let us move football elsewhere and have all our other sports in the Southern Conference. So that's something else that we have to look at when evaluating this move up is all of our sports. Our baseball team's on the rise. Our basketball team, it's not there yet, but there's definitely potential there. So there's a lot more to consider than just football. Football drives the bus financially, like you said, but it's that you can't. Everything else does take a back seat, but you can't make a move strictly based on football. That's just, one, not fair to the rest of the sports, but two, in my opinion, not financially safe to do, because who knows what's going to happen to those other sports. And then with Title IX in there, if you have to lose some sports because of finances, then it's just a bad place to be in from the get-go. So it's got to be evaluated all the way across the board. And I mean, I'm trusting Charlie Cobb and Chancellor Peacock and everybody else involved to make the right decision. And I think that's honestly the reason we haven't jumped on board in another conference yet, is because that right conference has not invited us.
Yeah, and among our fans, I think Cobb has gotten some criticism, some of it fair, some of it unfair, and how the whole trying to transition from FCS to FBS has gone. I think that him and Dr. Peacock have been very clear in that they do want to move up, but they want to be selective. They want to make sure that the right opportunity presents itself, not just any opportunity. And I think that's great, because they are looking at this, for the long-term good of our university, and not just, what might excite the fans for the next couple of months and get some more butts in the seats for the next year or two, but how this is going to affect our school in the long run. I think that's great. And he's drawn some criticism for being a little bit tight-lipped about it, and that I don't really think is any kind of grounds for criticism, because you never know. These things change all the time. The last thing you want to do is say something publicly, even hinting that you're going to be joining one conference or another, and end up with egg on your face if it doesn't happen that way. And also, I think that kind of playing a little closer to the vest and holding on to your cards in the first round of realignment might end up being the best thing, because with everything that's changing right now, say we had joined, now obviously I don't think we would have ever turned down a Conference USA invite, but if we had joined a Conference USA or Sun Belt, with all the uncertainty out there right now, it's entirely possible we could have joined a conference that's going to look completely different 6 months from now as it did than at the time we joined it. So there's just so many moving parts in this. It's going to be really hard to tell exactly what's going to happen, and I'll be like the rest of us in the off season, I'll be anxiously awaiting some news to see what happens. But I do trust Charlie Cobb to make the right decision. I think he's done well for us. The one criticism I would say is that he made some comments that were a little bit disparaging about the Sun Belt. It's been probably a year or two ago now, and whether that really has any effect on our prospects of getting into that conference, I highly doubt it. There's a different conference commissioner there than there was a couple of years ago when those comments were made. The conference itself is doing a lot better than it was when those comments were made, and this is a business decision. I don't think there's any room for hurt feelings, and I think that if they think we're the best thing for their conference, they're going to add us regardless of what might or might not have been said a couple of years ago. One thing that I do certainly agree with you on is that if at all possible, or really, frankly, at all costs, I would like to avoid our football and the rest of our sports being housed in different conferences. I think East Carolina, kind of had a situation that was a little too good to pass up. The Big East, even though it's not what it used to be, it has that name recognition. It's a BCS conference. If you can get your football into a conference like that, I really can't blame them. I think they did what's best for them. But for us, when we're looking at conferences, Conference USA, Sun Belt, any of that, I do not want to be in a situation where we have our football program housed in one of those conferences, and then our Olympic sports and wherever the Atlantic Sun or the Big South or the Southern Conference won't let us stay on. So I don't want to get into a situation where we're having to split up our football program from the rest of our athletic department and have all of our different teams, having rivalries with different schools and traveling to different places. I'd like to keep them all housed in one conference.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that 100%. It's best for us at that level to keep them all in one conference. And we have another question here, and I'll go ahead and take first stab at it. It's kind of a twofold question, and it's will we see a conference change within the next 4 years? And then on top of that, should we take Georgia Southern wherever we do go? My answer to that question is yes, absolutely. I think within the next 4 years, we will be in an FBS conference somewhere, whether it's MAC, Sun Belt, Conference USA. I don't know. It's, as we've all witnessed in the past year and a half, 2 years with the conference realignment, it's there's way too many moving parts for me to be able to predict that. I don't have any of the behind-the-scenes information. I don't have any kind of those connections to know what's going on elsewhere. So, yes, I think we will see a conference change. Yes, I do think it will be in an FBS conference, but I don't know where. My gut feeling is the Sun Belt, but I'm not positive on that. And should we take Georgia Southern wherever we go? I think the best way to answer that is it depends on where we do go. If it is the Sun Belt or Conference USA, yes, I think we take Georgia Southern should they get an invite as well. That's where it all boils down to is at this point, both schools would have to have an invite in order to make that jump. So if we have the invite but Georgia Southern does not, I don't think that should be any kind of contingency. I think we should just go regardless if Georgia Southern has an invite. But at the same time, I don't think either one of those conferences are going to invite us without inviting Georgia Southern. If it's a conference like MAC, then no, I don't think we take Georgia Southern, only because of the location issues. Mac is a more northern school. We, as it is, would be the southernmost school there, so I don't think Georgia Southern would get that invite going to the MAC. So I know it's not really a much of an answer to that question on should we take Georgia Southern, but it's really hard to say at this point. But I do see us being in an FBS conference within the next 4 years. What do you think, Mike?
I agree. In regards to the first part about whether we will see a conference change in the next 4 years, I think yes, absolutely. I think I would be shocked if 4 years from now we were still in the Southern Conference. To be honest, I think we'll probably, there will be a transitional period, but I think we will announce a conference change probably within the next 1 to 2 years. So that I definitely think that we will. In regards to the Georgia Southern aspect, that's a great rival. They're our best football rival at this point. We have the most in common with them than anyone else in the conference. A big public school, football first, good baseball. So they're a great rival, and obviously I would always welcome the opportunity to stay in a conference with them. As far as whether we should take them, to me, I see at this point really 3 possibilities, and how it relates to Georgia Southern I think is different every time. As you mentioned in the MAC, I think that's probably the longest shot of all the conferences, just because they have a pretty tight geographic footprint. A lot of schools in Michigan and Ohio. They do have a couple of outliers, Buffalo and Buffalo, UMass, a couple of ones that are outside of the footprint. But for the most part, they're a pretty tight geographic conference, and that makes us, I think, a little bit more of a long shot if we went there. Because of the geography, Georgia Southern I don't think would really be an option. The second possibility would be Conference USA. If we get an invite from Conference USA, I would say if they invite Georgia Southern as well, great, because it brings a rival for us. But I certainly don't think that should be any sort of hindrance to us going if Georgia Southern does not get an invite, because Marshall was already there. Marshall would already serve as that sort of pre-existing rival. UNC Charlotte's in that conference. That would be an immediate rival right off the bat. So we already kind of have a couple of existing rivals in place in that conference as it is. So it would be great if they came, but I don't think it should be anything that we would want to try to negotiate for them. On the other hand, if it's the Sun Belt and it's the most likely scenario, meaning that in all likelihood we would go to the Sun Belt if they lost a couple teams, which looks like the most likely candidates would be Middle Tennessee and Western Kentucky. In that case, because Middle Tennessee and Western Kentucky are the only 2 schools in that conference, aside from Georgia State, that are really a reasonable drive from Boone and would be the closest, most natural geographic rivals, we really wouldn't have a natural rival in that conference. We would be a little bit of an outlier. Not that we're necessarily close to Georgia Southern either, but they are an existing rival. And I think if Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee were to leave that conference, I'm not sure how comfortable I would feel going there without Georgia Southern, just because we wouldn't have any history with any of those teams. Georgia State would be relatively close, but with them being in the big market, you never know how long they're going to be around anyway. And outside of them, the closest teams to us, we're looking at Troy and South Alabama and Alabama, North Texas, the 2 schools in Louisiana, Monroe and Lafayette, and Arkansas State. So them along with Florida Atlantic. There's just nobody that's geographic close to us. Nobody we've got any history with if Middle Tennessee and Western Kentucky leave. So for the Sun Belt, if the invite comes after the 2 of those schools leave, I would say that that's something we should bring to the table and say that we want a natural rival in this conference, and if we went without and if we went after those 2 schools departed, I would say it would definitely be in our best interest to do, maybe not necessarily decline an invite if they won't invite Georgia Southern as well, but I think it would be in our best interest to do whatever we could to bring Georgia Southern along with us if we went to the Sun Belt.
Yeah, I agree, and I hate to continue on this, but we have one more question. This is going to be the last question we take on the conference realignment stuff. But the last thing is, if everything was perfect, what would we like to see happen? And I'll go ahead and take first stab at it again. If everything was perfect, what I would like to see happen is get a all sports to the SEC. And no, I'm just kidding. No, if everything were perfect, I know that obviously can't happen. But if everything were perfect, I think I'm taking a different approach than you are, Mike. I think if everything were perfect, I would want Georgia Southern and us to go to Sunbelt. And the only reason I say that is because Conference USA, as of now, they have more of a name recognition. But with all those teams leaving, SMU, Houston, now ECU, all those teams leaving, I think that they're weakening themselves. Yes, they will likely make more money, just because they are going after teams now that have the market share, which is the reason Charlotte got the invite over us to begin with, or at least a large reason why. And I just see like UNC Charlotte being there. They haven't played a down of football yet, so they're going to struggle for a few years, which is going to bring the conference down. You got Old Dominion going there, who they're very successful on the FCS front. I believe they're the number 3 seed in the playoffs. So they're very successful, but they've only been playing football for a few years now. They brought it back a couple of years ago, so they're going to have a learning curve, and I think that's going to bring down the Conference USA overall level of competition. And I think the Sun Belt is going to be a better conference than Conference USA. Some teams will likely leave, Middle Tennessee and Western Kentucky. But you still have Arkansas State, you still have Louisiana Monroe, Louisiana Lafayette, and those are solid teams that we can compete with from the get-go. Add on to that, we would likely, both of us, Georgia Southern and App, we would likely be the top of the attendance in the conference. So we wouldn't lose that. We would still have home field at the Rock. Our geographic rivalries won't be the same as they are in the Southern Conference, but our overall competition is going to be better, especially if we bring in Georgia Southern. How about you, Mike?
Well, I agree with a lot of that. One thing that I will point out, and I don't want to sound like I'm ragging on them, but in the Sun Belt, Georgia State is a pretty terrible football team, and they're going to join the Sun Belt, so I think they might hurt the level of competition there as well. To me, what I think would be a perfect situation all boils down to maybe not even so much the short-term quality of the play on the field, but where we could get the most geographic rivals. And again, since this is all hypothetical, perfect world, something that's not going to happen. What I would love to see happen is, instead of the Sun Belt getting poached by Conference USA, the Sun Belt brings on Appalachian, Georgia Southern, and also pulls in Marshall and Southern Miss from Conference USA. Gives them enough teams to have a championship game, set it up in divisions, and the division could be Appalachian, Georgia Southern, Middle Tennessee, Western Kentucky, Georgia State, and Marshall. And that would be the our half of the conference. It would be big enough to have a championship game. The divisions would make it, geographically feasible. We'd have existing rivalries with Georgia Southern, existing rivalries with Marshall, and pretty easy geographic rivals to build with Georgia State, Western Kentucky, and Middle Tennessee.
Yeah, honestly, I hadn't even thought about that. That's definitely a great. Again, if all things are perfect, I don't think that's going to happen. But that I agree that if all things are perfect, that would probably be better than going straight to Conference USA or straight to Sun Belt, having basically the best of those best of those geographic rivalries for us combined into whatever conference we're going into. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. So I mean, it's it's kind of a revolving door. We never know what's really going to happen. But honestly, the thing about how the realignment is done now, where you're not independence is not an option. You can't move up without an invite. Appalachian has very, very limited leverage, if at all. So I don't think we're really much of a position to turn down an invite. So if we get one, and I think we'll probably take whatever invite we get, unless, it's something where either the Sun Belt or the MAC just gets, completely ravaged by one of the bigger conferences and we get an invite and, it's really going to be a bad situation for us. That would be one thing. But, otherwise, I think we probably will, take an FBS invite, if we get one and it's feasible.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so we went a much longer time on that than we had expected. In fact, we just threw that in at the last second. We weren't even planning on talking about that, and that took up majority of the showtime we have. So we're gonna go ahead and get started with the Around the SoCon feature that we do every week, and this time it's only going to be touching on two teams as everyone else is out of the playoffs. The two remaining teams are Wofford and Georgia Southern. Wofford, of course, beat us at home, and then Georgia Southern we beat at Paulson Stadium when they were ranked number one. So both teams are very good, and both teams have games at home this week. So, Mike, how about you go ahead and tell our listeners about those two teams and how the playoffs will unfold for them?
All right, yeah, I'll try to get through this pretty quick because I know we did go over and we want to save some time to obviously break down Illinois State pretty in depth. So I'll go through this pretty quick. Wofford, finished off the season identical record. Obviously, we're the three co-champs. They finished 8-3, 6-2 in the SoCon. Bounced back after our loss to Stanford. They beat Chattanooga in overtime, and then they gave South Carolina all they wanted. Took a 7-7 tie in Columbia into the fourth quarter. Ended up losing 24-7. But gave a strong enough performance that even with 7 D1 wins, got an at-large berth. They're going to host New Hampshire. New Hampshire also finished 8-3. They were 6-2 in the Colonial, but I thought their inclusion was a little bit of a surprise. They got blown out 64-35 by Towson in the season finale. They didn't win a game in the regular season over a playoff participant. Towson was the second team this year to score 60 points on them. Both were in conference games too. Old Dominion also put up 64 points back on September 22nd when they played at ODU. New Hampshire's got a really good offense, but their defense really struggles. And against a team like Wofford, who runs a wing-bone offense that's very difficult to prepare for if you're not used to it, even with a bye week, 2 weeks is not enough time to get ready for that offense, I don't think. I think Wofford's going to move the ball all up and down the field. I think Eric Breitenstein's going to have another big day. I think their defense does just enough to get a stop, even though, gets just enough stops to get the win, even though UNH is very explosive on offense. I'm going with a 38-31 final with Wofford winning that game. And then Georgia Southern, they after taking the loss to us at home, they romped all over Howard 69-24. Then they went to Athens to play Georgia. They actually kept it very close for the first half. Georgia ran away from them in the second. They lost 45-14. They got the number 5 overall seed in the tournament. They have Central Arkansas coming to Statesboro to face off on Saturday. The Bears are the Southland Conference champions. They finished the season 9-2, 7-1 in the conference. Their only FCS loss was a Stephen F. Austin back on the 29th of September. They've won 6 games since then. They're the only FCS team to beat Sam Houston State, who was the national runner-up last year. I think they're a tough matchup for Georgia Southern. They have a really good passing offense. They go for about 270 yards a game through the air. As we saw when we were down there, the Georgia Southern secondary is green. They're definitely, kind of a question mark for that team. They're going to be tested again. If Brent Russell is back in the lineup and healthy and eligible, I think they'll be able to get into the backfield and force the issue and hopefully, keep that UCA offense off the field, keep them, make them a little uncomfortable out there. This is a really tough draw for them. But again, they sort of have that element of surprise with the triple option. They've got a ton of speed. For a team that hasn't seen the triple option and playing in the Southland, hadn't seen as many teams with the same kind of athleticism as Georgia Southern. I like the Eagles to pull it out at Paulson in a close one. I'm going with the 41-38 final.
All right, yeah, and with Wofford, UNH, I'm on the same page as you as I think Wofford's they're just going to run all over UNH. UNH isn't going to be able to stop them. Their defense is horrendous. They're of the mindset of just score more points and don't worry about defense kind of deal, and I think that doesn't work in a playoff situation usually. So I think Wofford is gonna dominate that game, and I don't even think it's gonna be that close, to be honest. I'm not gonna give a final score prediction, but I just think Wofford's just gonna absolutely dominate that game, and New Hampshire will be out of the playoffs. And then the Eagles, I'm in 100% agreement with you. This is gonna be a very, very tight game. I'm picking Central Arkansas to upset the Eagles. The Eagles are number 5 overall seed, but Central Arkansas, their offense is exactly what Georgia Southern's weakness is, and that's passing the ball. They're gonna. I mean, we saw when we played them that they could not stop the pass regardless. Yeah, Brent Russell was hurt. They had some injuries on the field, but so did we, and they still couldn't stop us. So I'm gonna pick Central Arkansas over the Eagles. Again, I'm not gonna give a score prediction. I'm just gonna give a prediction that Central Arkansas will beat Georgia Southern Eagles this week. So yeah, and obviously the playoffs are underway. We had some games last week, the first round games last week, and we have a quality Missouri Valley Conference football team coming to visit us at the Rock this week, and so we're going to go ahead and turn our show back to us, our football team, finally, and we're going to preview this weekend's game with Illinois State and how the bracket's going to set up for us. Basically, the winner of this game is going to have to will likely have to travel to Eastern Washington. They face Wagner this weekend in Cheney, Washington. Eastern Washington is the number 2 seed, so they should win. Obviously, any given Saturday, this is a playoffs. You never know what's going to happen, but Eastern Washington should win, and if they do, then the winner of our game against Illinois State will have to travel to them. Should Eastern Washington lose, that's up in the air on where the game would be, as the home games are based on a bid if you're not a seed, and neither one of those teams would be a seed. So that's still up in the air. Likely would be apt though should we win and Eastern Washington lose. So a little bit about Illinois State. They're 8-3 on the regular season. All 3 losses coming in the Missouri Valley Football Conference. And they are a very, very strong road team. Their quality wins were on the road at Northern Iowa, Indiana State, and they also beat an FBS opponent in Eastern Michigan. So they're a very solid team. We've got our work cut out for us. So Mike, how about you go in a little more of the details of the team?
Yeah, I agree. This is not an easy draw for us. They're honestly of the teams in the field that we're potentially matching up with, they were probably the one I wanted to see least. I was kind of hoping to get New Hampshire to come down to Boone. They're a tough matchup, but I think obviously being at home, we've got an advantage, and even as well as they played on the road, obviously being at home, not having to leave Boone, them having to get on a plane and fly down here, and us having the last really 3 full weeks to prepare for the playoffs and heal up and hopefully get Jamal back to 100%. That'll all work in our advantage. But Illinois State is a very, very good team. They have a 4-year starter at quarterback, Matt Brown. Big kid, 6'4", 230 pounds. As I mentioned, he's been starting all 4 years. He's been on campus up there. He's a late-round NFL prospect. He's got a really strong, accurate arm. On the season, he completed 63% of his passes, 2,676 yards, 20 touchdowns, and only 10 interceptions. He is more of a pocket passer. He's not a dual threat quarterback by any means, but he is very big and strong, and he can get tough yards, especially in the red zone. He's only got 113 rushing yards on the season, but he has 6 rushing touchdowns. That goes to show you that he's not necessarily a threat to break off a big, get chunks of yards, 30, 40 yards at a time. But when they get in close, they're not afraid to have him put his head down and bulldoze his way into the end zone. So we will have to keep an eye on that and really try to contain him in the red zone. They're a very veteran team. I mean, as I go through and talk about some of their key players, you'll notice that they've got a lot of upperclassmen on this team. His favorite target is fellow senior Tyrone Walker. He's got 71 catches, 995 yards, 6 touchdowns on the season. Their offensive line is veteran, and their offensive line is huge. The average size of their 5 starters are 6'5", 316 pounds. So they've got a lot of beef up front. They've only given up 10 sacks all year, so they protect Brown very well. He makes good decisions. He's got a strong arm. He's got weapons around him. Leading rusher Also a senior, Darrell Dunn, 6'1", 220 pounds. He's got 850 rushing yards on the season, 12 touchdowns. However, as a team, they don't put up big numbers on the ground. As a team, they're only averaging 136 rushing yards per game. Total offense, 384 yards. So they don't put up enormous numbers on offense, but they are efficient. They average, a tick under 400 yards per game. They average 29 points a game. But to me, the biggest concern is how we're going to contain their passing game, and a lot of that will come down to how our defensive line performs. And I think in order for us to disrupt them, we can't let him sit back in the pocket and pick us apart and let him just kind of spread the ball around, because if outside of Demetrius McCray, if our guys are left on an island in one-on-one coverage, it's going to be very tough for them to really keep those routes blanketed while he's making his progression. So our defensive line is going to have to get some pressure on him. We're going to have to we have to be able to get past those big guys they have up front, and hopefully make him uncomfortable, and have him forcing some passes before he's ready to make them. And on the other side of the ball, they might be the best we've seen this season. They're only giving up 310 yards a game and 22.8 points per game. And I mentioned on the other side of the ball that State had only given up 10 sacks this year. They've gotten 35 of them. So they're averaging over 3 sacks a game, and they're coming out of a very tough conference to do that. So they are they're a very quality team. Their front seven is very good. Middle linebacker, also a senior, Mike Zimmer leads the team with 109 tackles. He's also got 5.5 tackles for loss and 4.5 sacks. And then if you look at their defensive front, their second leading tackler is defensive end Colton Underwood. He's a junior. He's got 89 tackles. And just honestly, an eye-popping number. I thought it was wrong at first. He's got 18 tackles for loss, and he's got 9.5 sacks. Their third leading tackler is their defensive tackle. He's a junior as well, Shelby Harris, 76 tackles, 12.5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. And then on the other side of Colton Underwood, they have a senior, Nate Palmer, at the other defensive end, 59 tackles, 13 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. So you can see right there, that's 3 defensive linemen right there that have 19.5 sacks on the year. So they're very strong up front, and their secondary doesn't get any easier. Anchored once again by a senior, free safety Ben Erickson. He's got 48 tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, a sack, and 7 interceptions this year. So he's a ball hawk. If Jamal stays locked in on somebody for too long and lets him read where that ball's going, he will make a play on it. And he's got good ball skills. He's a playmaker. We've got to be cognizant of him. We've really got to try to, whether it's using a pump fake, doing what we have to do to kind of throw him off the scent. We've got to account for him all the time. And as a team, they've got 15 interceptions, and they're only giving up 175 passing yards per game. So you can see that, both up front getting pressure on the quarterback, getting turnovers through the interception. They're a very strong defense. And one thing that jumped out to me just in looking at their defensive production this year is it says a lot about a team when 2 of your 3 leading tacklers are on the defensive line. That goes to show that a lot of guys aren't getting past that first level on them, and that is a very telling stat, not just in how many tackles they have, but in that 2 of their top 3 tacklers are on the defensive line. So when it's that frequent, the guys aren't even getting past the first level, and those guys on the line are making tackles. That says a lot about what kind of pressure they can put on you. So I really think it's going to be important for us, given that we do have a young offensive line. We don't have a starter that's older than a sophomore on that front line. So we're young. A lot of these guys are going to be seeing their first playoff action. So I think it's very important that we utilize those short routes. We utilize some bubble screens outside of the wide receivers, some swing passes to Stephen Miller, just to get our playmakers in space and be able to get the ball around without having to ask our offensive line to hold their blocks for 3, 4, 5 seconds while somebody gets open down the field. And I think if that happens, then the defensive line eventually is going to have to stop pinning their ears back if we're able to get those short passes to the outside and kind of, catch it, use their aggressiveness against them while they're trying to run straight at the quarterback. We swing it out to Stephen Miller and he's got space in front of him. Then they're not going to be able to pin their ears back as much. I think that will set up the running game. I think that will set up the deep passes down the field to Sean Price as the game goes on. But I think we really have to keep him honest and open the game up with those short passes and some read option maybe to the outside where, assuming Jamal's knee is healthy enough for him to do it, to have that read option, we can take it to the outside and possibly pitch it to the outside to Miller, Andrew Peacock, get creative where we have Andrew Peacock taking some snaps out of the backfield, possibly passing it like he did in the Furman game. But I think we really have to get creative because their front seven is going to cause us some problems if we just think we can go in there and line up and run the ball right at them. And that's the problem I ran into against Maine last year. It was well documented. We only ran the ball for 3 yards in our playoff game last year against Maine, and a lot of that was, some of it was personnel and some of it was play calling because we just lined up and tried to run it straight at them. And if we do that, we're going to hit the same kind of brick wall we did last year. So I think we've got to change up the offensive game plan. We've got to get creative because of all the positive things I've said about Illinois State, and they are a really good team, we are going to have a speed advantage at almost every skill position. We've got some incredible athletes. We have arguably, the best set of wide receivers at the FCS level. We have 4 guys that I wouldn't trade in for anybody. Stephen Miller has proven to be durable. He's proven he can run in the middle, and he is very, very explosive. When he gets in the open field, he's capable of making big plays against anybody's defense. So we've got to utilize that speed. We've got to spread them out. We've got to get the ball out of Jamal's hand quickly because we just can't ask too much out of our offensive line. I think we have to be smart in how we game plan for them. They do have some weaknesses. One of them is their discipline in regards to penalties. They've been penalized 80 times this season. They're averaging 65 penalty yards a game. They've given up 28 first downs via the penalty this year, and they're also not strong in the kick return game on either side. They're only averaging 19.5 yards per return. Gave up a big 98-yard kick return touchdown against North Dakota State. The season finale was really a turning point in that game when they were controlling that game for the first part of it. And hopefully this time off will allow Tony Washington to heal up. I'd love to have him back there returning kicks. I think he could. I think he can make some big plays for us. But this is a lot of our fans don't know a whole lot about Illinois State because they play in the Missouri Valley, and we've never faced them before. And I think a lot of people will think that, because of our history with that conference, we're 4-0 all time against the Missouri Valley. We beat Northern Iowa for the national championship. We also beat Youngstown State, and we beat Western Illinois very convincingly in the playoffs. And I think that because of that, and we also had a victory over Southern Illinois, and because we were 4-0, 3 of those games being fairly lopsided. A lot of people might think that they're going to be big and they're going to be slow and they're not going to be able to handle our speed, and I just don't think that's going to be the case. I do think we certainly have a speed advantage, but they're big, they're physical, and our speed advantage isn't going to mean anything if we can't get past the line of scrimmage. So this is a tough matchup for us. This is really obviously there's never an easy matchup in the playoffs, but this was a tough draw for us, and I think it's great the way it worked out that we had plenty of time to heal up and get ready for them, because we're really going to need to go out there and play our best game of the season if we want to get to the round 8.
Yeah, and you went through everything, so I'm just gonna kind of just follow up with that and say that what worries me about this game is at least their offensive line is very similar in terms of size to Villanova and Maine, and as we know, the last 2 years they've more or less shut us out in the playoffs. So it's been. Seeing that is kind of worrisome to me, and then looking at these stats from the D-line alone, like Mike said, 2 of the top 3 tacklers are from the D-line, one of which is a defensive tackle. So that's also very worrisome, because we're not going to be able to get we're not going to be able to get Stephen Miller very many touches up front or up the middle, or bouncing them outside, because their defensive ends are also very good. So, and they're also their whole team is very they're all basically all upperclassmen. The whole starting lineup is basically all upperclassmen. So they haven't been to the playoffs before necessarily, but they've played in big games. They've won several games together. So that it's going to be a tight ball game. And I think, although they do have great stats, I think some of the defensive line stats are a little skewed. I only say that because they do play in the Missouri Valley Football Conference, and that conference is notorious for power football. So they play in a conference where they have a power back running up the middle 2-3 times every 4 downs kind of deal. So they are a little skewed, but at the same time, they're obviously very talented. I mean, you don't get 89 tackles and 18 tackles for loss and 9.5 sacks if you're not talented, regardless of what conference you're in, regardless of what level you're in. So the team up front, in the ditches up front, on both sides of the ball, Illinois State is very, very good, very talented, and very big. And I think that's going to be our biggest challenge is getting around that, using our speed, like you mentioned, Mike, using our speed to basically over or outweigh their size advantage. The other thing that worries me is our offensive line. We're very young. We at times have been suspect this year, but on the other side of that, at times we have been great. So it really depends on which team comes out, which squad of the offensive line comes out, and how they play and how they're going to protect Jamal Jackson. I don't know if his knee is 100% healed. I don't know if he's going to have freedom to run. I don't know any of that. They're kind of keeping that tight-lipped. But what I have heard is he took his first snaps in practice for the first time since he got injured. So he played the last 2 games without even taking snaps in practice, apparently, and he's looking good. So that's a plus. So this game is really it's a toss up. I think with it, what's going to help us is one, they're a very penalized team. They've been penalized 80 times on the season, and they average 65 yards of penalties per game. The other stat, probably even bigger than that, is they've given up 28 first downs via a penalty. So that's going to be key, especially being at the Rock. If we can get them on their heels to begin with early by being loud, that's going to obviously be in our advantage. And then the return game, this team to me is similar in concept of how they play to kind of a Furman and an Elon. Elon and the fact that they pass the ball very well, but then they throw in the Furman aspect of being a balanced offense. The difference is, one, they're a senior-laden team, and two, they're very, very good at it, and they do both very well. I think if we don't spot them early points via a kick return for a touchdown or a fumble recovery in the touchdown like we did at Furman, it's going to obviously help us. We don't spot them those points, but it's going to, I think that's what's ultimately going to decide this game. Like I said, it's going to be a very, very tight one. They tout a very strong defense and have a very good quarterback who's a late-round NFL draft prospect. So if we can make them one-dimensional more than they want to be, again, they're not a very good run team as is, but if we can limit them to under 100 yards running, I'd like our linebackers and athletes in the secondary to contain their passing attack. I think we're going to be playing a bend but don't break kind of style defense. Let them get the 4 or 5 yard passes here and there, but don't let them into the end zone. Make them get those field goals or make them make a mistake. Either way, I don't see either team winning this one in a blowout at all. And so I'm going to go with the homer pick simply because we're at home and because I love the Mountaineers. But it's going to be very close, and I'm going to go with a 28-27 win, Mountaineers.
Yeah, you made a lot of good points. One thing that you mentioned, in regards to obviously the big sack numbers that they've put up this year. I think a lot of that is going to come down to to how our offensive line holds up. They've obviously had they've had good games. They've had bad games. But I think another huge part in, whether we're able to, limit their amount of sacks and big plays they get on defense will also come down to how healthy Jamal is. Because if you look at it, Jamal Jackson was sacked 9 times in the last 2 games. Before those last 2 games, he'd only been sacked 12 times all year. So, and that goes hand in hand with the 2 games he played wearing that knee brace. Before, even if the defensive line did get some pressure in the backfield, he was able, he's shifty enough. He's not Armando Edwards, but he's shifty enough and strong enough that he can get away from some of that pressure, step up in the pocket, and either make a throw or at least get a couple yards on the ground. So the health of his knee, I think, is going to be not as important as the offensive line play, but close to as important as the offensive line play in regards to how well we're able to keep them from getting sacks. So I think that's another big aspect of this game that we probably won't know until game day. And then in looking at some of the impressive things that that Illinois State has done this year, Appalachia's not too far behind in a couple of those. Yeah, that they have 35 sacks. That's very impressive. Appalachian also has 25 of their own. Illinois State's got 15 interceptions on the season. Appalachia's got 14. So, we might be able to get some big plays out of our defense. Obviously, we give up a lot more yards than they do. We give up about 6 points a game more than they do. So, we don't come in with the same kind of highly regarded defense that they do, but we do still have a group that is capable of making big plays. If we can get a couple of those, that will make a big difference. Also, they are not that strong in special teams, and if Tony Washington is able to come back at 100% and maybe give us some plays in the return game, I think that's another thing that could really help to swing momentum in our favor. As we've both said, Appalachia's got a speed advantage in this game. We have a speed advantage against most teams we play, but we do have a speed advantage in this game. We're giving up a lot of size, though, so they're strong up front. They want to run at us. We need to try to run around them. So, it's really all gonna come down to who can impose their will on the opponent in this game. If we get caught into a game that's field position, a lot of 3 and outs, going back and forth, trying to play this game in the teens or the 20s, then I'm not sure how well we're gonna fare in a game like that. But at the same token, if we're able to pick up the pace a little bit and run a lot of plays and keep their defense on the field and, get this game into the 30s, I think we've got a great chance to win it. Sort of along the same lines of what you said, I think the only thing that would really surprise me in this game is a blowout either way. I think these are 2 teams that are it's a true match of opposite. It really is, kind of offense versus defense, power versus speed. And it's going to be very interesting to see who can impose their will and who can come out on top. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it'll be a great game. I know a lot of Appalachian fans are apprehensive after what's happened in our last 2 playoff games. We had kind of lopsided losses against Villanova and against Maine. Even though Illinois State is a similar type team as those, I don't see the same kind of outcome. I think this is going to be a very, very tightly contested ball game. Our offensive coaching staff has done a great job this year. We're much more balanced than we were last year. We've got a great threat in the backfield in Stephen Miller. So we have a tailback that can keep them honest. We've got 4 receivers out there that we're spreading the ball out to, as opposed to last year where pretty much if you shut down Brian Quick, you shut down our offense. And we didn't really have the running threat to keep people off balance. So I think the offensive balance we've got this year, the rest we have hopefully to get our guys healthy, let our defense game plan for Illinois State. I think that you're going to see, regardless of what the final score is, I think that you're going to see a much better performance out of this Mountaineer team than we've seen the last 2 postseasons, and I can say that pretty confidently. And obviously, I sure hope that that they prove me right. And I'm expecting a good performance from them, a spirited performance, and I think this is going to be a really close game. I think it'll come down to 1 or 2 big plays that's going to decide it. Whether that's in special teams, whether it's turnovers, remains to be seen. But I'm expecting a very, very competitive ball game, and I'm going to predict Appalachian pulls it out at home, final 31-28. So that's my prediction for the first round of the playoff. Let's hope that hope they can make us look good, make us look smart, and go out there and win this game for us. But that's the prediction I'm going with. So I appreciate everybody listening. For those of you guys that are heading up the mountain this weekend, please travel safely, cheer loudly, enjoy the game.
All right, that's all for us tonight. Sorry, we went a little overtime because we got a little overboard with the FBS discussion. But thanks for tuning in, and we hope you can make it back next week, Tuesday, December 4th at 7:30. And we're hoping we'll be discussing a Mountaineer victory and a quarterfinal matchup in the playoffs. If you do plan on coming to the Rock this weekend, please come tailgate with me. I'm going to be near the top of the library deck. I'll have my appstatecentral.com banners hanging, so please come find me, introduce yourself. I love hanging out with other App fans. And as always, you can find us online at appstatecentral.com, on Facebook at facebook.com/appstatecentral, and on Twitter with the name appstatecentral. For my co-host Mike, I am Bryden. Thanks for tuning in to the appstatecentral.com weekly podcast. Let's beat the Redbirds.